Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today is October 17, 2025. I want to thank Rob Grant, his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Please subscribe. Also want to welcome today's guest, Sara Chapman. Where are you calling from, Sara?
I'm coming from Chicago.
How cool is that? First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Um, I I would say that the best thing for a human being is to maximize the amount of time you can spend on things that bring you joy and minimize the amount of time you spend doing things that do not bring you joy.
Really good. You are articulate and concise. I love it. So, what's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
I would say experiential. I think that it's one thing to read a book about a place or a person or an event, but to like the countries and the places that I've been to, I feel like I know in a different way than ones, even if I've read a lot about them. There's something about being in a space, smelling the smells, seeing how people greet each other. Yeah, so I really appreciate experiential forms of information.
That's really good. But you sort of implied, did you grow up a reader?
Yeah, definitely a
Okay.
lot of reading.
Okay. Did you become a reader, one, because your parents told you, two, they did as an example, or three, on your own?
I think my parents set an example that reading was something that was enjoyable, but they didn't like force me to it. And in fact, they actually, this is not a decision people would make today, but they were concerned that I was going to be bored in kindergarten if I already knew how to read because they sensed I was going to learn it really quickly. So they purposely did not teach me how to read because they thought, I don't know, they thought I was learning too quick. So I basically, I don't know, I did learn, but so they didn't make an effort of like, you need to read. It was definitely something that if you put me in a room and there were books, I would just pick them up and I could sit for hours by myself. My parents and my relatives would say that, like they were spoiled about what kids were like with me because again, they could bring me to an adults event and just be like, go read your book. And I would just do that. And I guess that isn't how normal most kids behave.
Right. So, why do you think humans collect or gather information?
um, I think we just need information in order to live. I mean, not just humans. I think animals gather information about their environment and where there has been food in the past and where there hasn't been and where predators have been. And I think we don't gather that baseline information, we die, and then um, I guess we enjoy information that fills our higher level needs, beyond like food and shelter and stuff.
Do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I think it's innate because I think that animals do it too. Like I said, I think we're
Yeah.
all gathering information.
Do thoughts create emotions?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I notice that all the time where I mean, there's this quote from Hamlet that I still remember from high school that is like, maybe this isn't exact, but it's like, there's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And I think that's really, really profound. I think that you can very easily cause either intention, like a positive or a negative emotion, simply by dwelling on something or having a certain perspective on something. And so I think it's often important for me if I realize that I'm envisioning negative scenarios that like haven't happened yet but could happen, that makes me feel bad and that I should try to limit that beyond what might be like required for preparing for something.
Yeah, that's sort of what I grew up was the power of positive thinking. That was good.
Mhm.
Again, you're concise and articulate. I appreciate this, Sara. Yeah, this is fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
I don't know what I think usually until I start working it through out loud.
yeah.
Often that helps me figure out what it is that I think.
Yeah, Joan Didion says I don't know what I think until I write it. McLuhan says I don't know what I think until I say it. Can humans think without language?
I mean, dreams often have information in them that aren't based on language. It's hard to know. It depends on what the definition of think is, but but yeah, I think we have there are times when, for example, you like smell something and it takes you back to a different place and time, and it doesn't necessarily involve words or consciousness. You're just suddenly sort of experiencing it. So I think, yeah, I think so.
Because that's you touched on what Chomsky says: language is not just words; it's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Um, well, I guess that depends on why it's breaking down. I mean, one reason it could break down is if I'm trying to communicate with someone and we don't speak the same language at all. Um, I guess realistically, a lot of what you do then is simply cheat and just, pull out your phone and start translating. But absent that, I mean, you are going to communicate through gestures, facial expressions. It goes a long way to sort of smile and show or just show that your emotion with your face. If communication is breaking down because there simply aren't words to it's hard to put into words what's going on. I think that often can happen during like an emotional disagreement or something. Gosh, I don't really know in that case what happens other than I would say if I'm upset or something and I don't exactly understand why and I can't verbalize it, I guess my response is to like put a pause on it and
Yeah.
take some time to figure it out until those words do come to me and I do understand it.
Really good. And I like you using the word smile. Hey, if communication breaks down, try smiling. That was good. But your observations of humans in general, are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
um I have to say I feel like society wide, I feel like more feeling. I think that we all like to think that we're thinking beings, that we behave rationally. There's like all these like economic theories that if there's these incentives, people would behave this way and blah, blah, blah. But I think we see over and over again that, like, for example, the way we vote, it's often not based on like, I have a list of these pros and these cons. It's like really it's our gut of like, and it's not that we have research things. It's like you just sort of you feel without really needing to review the information. You have a sense of who you're aligned with. I think that we wish we were thinking beings, but more often we are feeling beings.
Really good, because you're a Chicago guy there. Obama hired Lakoff to help him get elected. And Lakoff, being a cognitive linguist, said, "Oh, go for feelings. That's what Republicans do. Don't go for issues. That's what Democrats do." And so Obama said hope, and he got elected. And so that is amazing, because most people do say feeling. But Bridget Bardot says, "When I make love, I don't think." And I'm like, good luck. How do you turn your brain off? And people who meditate, say think about not thinking. And there's a bumper sticker on a car on my street and it says, "Don't believe everything you think." And I'm like, well, you could say, "Don't believe everything you feel."
Yeah, that's for sure true. I think feelings are even more likely to be um, incorrect.
Yeah.
Um, But I would say that, I've never experienced the feeling, like the ability to actually completely stop thinking. Like I don't like I've tried meditating a little bit. I don't know that one actually ever gets to the point where they're not having any thoughts, but that the times in my life that I've felt most sort of like satisfied have been when I'm doing things that heavily put your mind only on one thing at a time,
Yeah.
like yeah, I think those are the times that have been, yeah, most satisfying for me.
I like that. These are two from Alan Turing in the 50s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
Um, I have to say I don't necessarily personally have a good definition of the soul or whether or not it exists.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm not sure.
No worries. And that's the other thing to be aware of, saying, I'm not sure, I don't know, I can't answer that, pass, that's all acceptable. So it's really, they're just prompts to get to talk. You don't even have to answer the question per se. But here's the second Turing question. Can machines think?
Um, Again, I mean, I think this is a question for someone who's studied philosophy a lot more than me, and or for scientists who like might both have their own definitions of thinking. But clearly, computers and now AI have for a long time been able to be presented with information and come to a conclusion about it, to solve problems, to play chess, to do whatever. And so my definition would be that that constitutes thinking.
Yeah, very good. So this one is, do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Uh, I guess I would say that maybe the way I pursue happiness is through meaning,
Yeah.
in trying to spend my time, um, uh, just like having meaningful experiences, whether that is connecting with a person I care about, whether that's experiencing something new. I would probably equate happiness and meaning as being sort of one and the same.
Right. And I got the question from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says that happiness doesn't necessarily last, meaning tends to last. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe that's suggesting that happiness is more of a sort of like immediate response to something that's happening, whereas meaning is more of a something that takes a longer time to develop and then lasts longer. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
good. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
Like in our own brain, the
Yeah,
consciousness of ourself.
yeah. And again, you put in the context you want. I mean, it's funny how I ask it. Is I say is the brain, and then I say, do we? So, yeah, I mean, it's really, is consciousness sort of there, or are we detecting it? I mean, and we're detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
I mean, I think the brain is what creates it. If your
Yeah,
brain is dead, then you're not conscious.
yeah.
So yeah.
What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Probably speed of light. I mean, seems like thought is kind of slow compared to the speed of light. I don't remember the exact number, but the speed of light is quite fast.
Audre Lorde, the poet, said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Her colleague Yvonne Rainer said, oh, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest? And it doesn't have to be tangible.
Wow. I feel like there are people who probably have really brilliant things to say about this.
It's really, Sarah, you put the questions in context you want. Really, what I'm asking is, what tool do you most gravitate towards? Then you can apply it with the word new if you want, or you can apply it to dismantling the master's house.
Um, I guess I have always liked using, like the part of the reason why I'm drawn to this work in archives is using historical information to sort of like uncover truths. I think that one thing that can be we always feel like the present moment is special, and it's very often the case that whatever is going on in the moment, it's hard to say that at this moment, but still, whatever is going on in the moment has both things that caused it in the past and things that were similar to it in the past, or things that maybe were opposite, and that paying attention to that creates a much richer understanding of the present, and might enable you to topple the dominant narratives, or whatever the master's house represents.
Really good. It's exactly the main theme we'll get into after we get by these initial philosophical questions. But you kind of reminded me a lot there of Wyndham Lewis's quote: artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. So that's like it, you were saying if you live in the moment, well, you're writing a detailed history, that's the past, of the future. So it's sort of
Mm-hmm.
like this thing, all times are happening now. So really, I really liked how you are explained that. So what's a toy you gravitate towards? I kept asking people about their favorite tool. What's a toy that you gravitate towards? And again, it doesn't have to be tangible.
Um, I don't know.
Okay.
Uh, I can't really think of objects that I'm particularly well. I guess I don't know.
Okay,
I'm not
that's all
sure.
right.
Maybe it'll come to
No,
me
no,
later.
no worries. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Well, I am someone who has spent a lot of my life trying to become very, very good at sleeping. Like when I was in college, I was on the cross country and track teams, and I went to University of Chicago, and I was a physics and astrophysics major. And all of that is to say that it was very stressful, and I didn't have a lot of time, and I was kind of exhausted all the time. And when it was time to sleep, I needed to sleep. And so I've always put a lot of work into sleep and procedures for sleeping. And one of those would be to simply not worry about anything at night, and to be very disciplined about any anything you think of right now that you are worried you can't possibly deal with right now. There's nothing you could do, and you need to banish that thought. I guess in the same way that people meditate and try to push thoughts out, I
Yeah.
simply try to reject the idea of worrying about anything at sleep. And it may be that your question was more like, while you're sleeping, like metaphorically, like just what worries you generally, but I answered it literally.
No, that's good. And in fact, that's an amazing thing. A lot of my questions can be interpreted metaphorically or literally. And the funny thing that McLuhan said was all words are metaphorical. So I always go, well, what's the word literal a metaphor for? Because it's such it's sort of like a Mobius strip or a snake eating its tail, you know. So it's like words evoke more in their meaning sometimes. And so this is McLuhan learning from the poet Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So Sarah, I asked you the question McLuhan probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
I mean, that's another sort of, I guess, paradox of humans, sort of going back to the thinking and feeling thing, is that I don't know. I think a lot of times we just simply go about our days doing whatever's easiest, and just simply not interrogating what's around us. And yeah, just not wanting to stop and deal with things that make the immediate goal harder, like whatever it is, like is it the way that we is our medical system appropriate? Is it good to be so focused on taking medications instead of, lifestyle change, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not like a RFK type guy, but yeah, I think I guess what I'm saying is I think that it often comes from trying to just focus on what we need to do in the immediate sense and not focusing on things that are either sort of intangible or like unknowable or like way down the road or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, it reminded me, I learned years ago, the Eastern philosophy tells you in regards to health to maintain your body. Western philosophy is you go to the doctor and say, I have something wrong, give me a cure. And they go, well, it's not a cure, but it's a remedy. So it
Mhm.
covers up when what you got to do is, one doctor told me when you're sick, that means your body's working. So you have to maintain. Very interesting. But back to artists, do artists have moral obligation?
I think it's perfectly fine for an artist if what they want to do is be completely apolitical and abstract and not consider issues at all. I mean, I think
Yeah.
some people need to do it, but I wouldn't put it on any individual person that it's their obligation.
Good. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Hmm. I guess I would like to say that I'm more afraid of old ideas, but I think that realistically, just looking at my personality, I think that I am a person who tends to be more resistant to change, slower to change. Um, so probably the actual answer is more afraid of new ideas. Not necessarily afraid, but just less likely to immediately embrace them. And that's something I like sort of actively work to try and of like change that reaction. But I think that's my instinct usually.
Yeah. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
I don't whenever I've tried to think of an early memory, I've always realized that it isn't a memory, it's a photograph. I used
Yeah.
to look at our family albums like a lot. And so
Yeah.
whenever I think I've thought of something, I'm like, no, that's me sort of just my mind putting, taking the camera inside my head instead
Yeah.
of where it was. I, yeah, I mean, so those things were like, like holding my sister when she was a baby, things like that.
Yeah.
But I don't really know that any of them are actual memories versus photos, or at least the photographs are so much more vivid that they've supplanted whatever
Yeah.
vague memories exist.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Um, I think that's really depends on the context. I think it can be both in different scenarios. If there has been a trauma in your life, and we all have traumas, even whether it's something as dramatic as like you were in the Holocaust, or it's something as mundane as like your mom died, or everyone's mom dies, but it's still traumatizing for everyone. And so in that case, memory, I mean, it can be a curse, and it also ultimately, when the trauma recedes, it can be a blessing to still have the good memories. But um, what was I going to say? I mean, obviously, not having memory is a terrible situation. Like people with Alzheimer's, at least it's terrible for their loved ones. I don't know that it's terrible for they themselves, but it's
Really true.
terrible for the people around them. It's a horrible thing to inflict on your
Yeah.
loved ones.
I think that's an amazing way you put it because I think Alzheimer's and dementia is so demonized. And it's like, hey, maybe that's just the way we're created. We like return to our childhood. Now we don't have to worry about paying bills or anything. But, when you forget the name of your family member, they get offended. It's like, oh, okay. But that was good that you could see both ends. Now tell me someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact?
Um, you mean my immediate family, like my parents and my sister?
However you want to put it in context, but that's generally it. Yeah. It can be like aunts or uncles, grandparents too, but whatever you define as immediate family is fine with me.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess yeah, my mom was a an educator. She was a junior high English teacher, and she was also a drama teacher. She taught, like, she directed plays when she also worked at a high school before. She taught the plays there. And I guess from her, I just learned to be interested in like arts and culture. You know, she took us to the Art Institute of Chicago. She was the picture lady for our school. I don't know if this is a widespread thing, but at our school, there was like a mom that once a month would like bring in some reproductions of artwork and like teach you about the artwork or something, like in elementary school. So she did that. And so I think she, yeah, just taught me to try to experience culture and that there's a lot of pleasure in it. And that's a good way of being in the world, I guess.
Beautiful. I was raised in Michigan, and Chicago Art Institute was such a big influence. Like when we would go to a trip there, it was always memorable. So the same question, Sarah, outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you, and what was the impact?
Um, yeah, I guess my first answer is maybe just going to be very similar to my mom, but oh well. My mom's best friend, Barb, was also a teacher and drama person. And so she similarly was very culturally interesting. You know, like most of my relatives, like, uh, you know, just like Midwestern kind of like normal people, they're not going to talk to you about a book or a play or whatever, you know, they're
Yeah,
going to so I think having my mom's friend Barb in my life, and that interest in culture was important, but she also never married. She was never really in a relationship. She when she was probably around my age or maybe younger, when she was 40ish, she got IVF and had a son on her own. And I think seeing her as an example of just like non-traditional like paths in life, because I think I
yeah,
came from a small town, again, like a Midwest. Everyone is just very like, you get married and you have kids and then you go to
yeah,
work at the office. And so having someone who, and she also for a number of years she lived with just her best friend, like they just, you know, they were roommates even as an adult. And they lived in Evanston, which was like as close to Chicago as you can get in the suburbs and whatever.
yeah,
So having that person who was a little more urban and sophisticated and just showing me that there are alternative lifestyle. I know it's not really way out there, her lifestyle, but just
yeah,
it showed me that there are alternatives to
yeah.
the structures I see in my family and my friends' families.
Really cool. So, did your parents raise you a particular religion?
We went to the Lutheran church and I was like baptized and confirmed and went to Sunday school when I was little, but I think it was primarily more of like this is what you do is you go to, you know, after I was confirmed, we didn't really go anymore. They weren't, I don't think they were, I mean, I don't know that, I definitely know that my dad struggled. He wished towards the end of his life, he wished he believed in God and just really couldn't make it happen. So I think they were not, it wasn't like a very religious context. It was more just of a like, well, your kids go to Sunday school and let's do the, you know, make grandma and grandpa happy.
Yeah. Do you pray?
No. When
If God,
I,
oh, go ahead.
oh, you can, well, I was just going to say that I think one of the formative like intellectual experiences of my like adolescence was like, um, whenever the point to maybe starting around like high school, sort of like actively rejecting the idea, the existence of God and religion, and just sort of working out that it was pretty nonsensical and just like reading whatever. You take an anthropology class and then you do this. I was reading a lot of like Carl Sagan and Richard Feynman, and Carl Sagan was really like, they were both like my heroes. And I think that there was a lot of Carl Sagan writing that was about how the universe is so magical and it's so incredibly amazing and unlikely that you exist, you know, that all of these things happened, you know, that like these molecules did this, and just like it's so incredibly amazing that it like diminishes it to think like, oh, there's just some being up there and he just snapped his fingers and made it. Like life on earth and in the universe is just so, so complex and beautiful, and you should appreciate it for that. And so in my high school years, I went through just one of those obnoxious atheist phases where I like, kind of ridiculed anyone who had faith. And I even wrote my college entrance exam for University of Chicago about these lofty ideals of how the only atheists are like true intellectuals and truly honest about life and blah, blah, blah. But then as an adult, you stop being that type of
No,
asshole.
that was really good because the both those are heroes to me, Carl and Richard, really good. And we'll get into that. But if God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Well, I mean, I'll preface this by saying that it just seems absurd that there would be some being that created like billions of beings and like would have any interest in me in particular out of all the millennia that people have, just like that maintains an interest in each one of us.
Yeah,
But I mean, I still feel that I would love it if there was an afterlife and that I got to run around in the fields with all of the people that I've lost and all
yeah,
of the pets that I've lost, and we get to just be together and do all the stuff we like forever. So I guess I would want my encounter with God be basically to have him or they saying like, welcome, it's going to be
yeah.
great.
Yeah, no, no, I like that because someone once told me that what happens to you after you die is whatever you believe happens to you. So if you
Mhm.
believe that, that's what's going to happen to you. And really good. I like that. It really touched me. So, do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I don't know that I necessarily think that evil as a concept exists or is very accurate. I think that there are a wide variety of reasons why humans treat each other badly, and some of them are, pretty explainable. Like, let's say you are starving and you just need something to eat, so you're going to steal from someone else. And there are other things that are like less explainable based on jealousy or, things like that. I think that there's the whole range of things where you can explain them. There's all the crimes you can commit that there's a reason. And then there's this small category of people that do things that are completely heinous for reasons that no one can possibly, I'm thinking like your Jeffrey Dahmer, your like serial killer, people who intentionally like torture people. And I guess maybe you can say that the reason is for whatever reason they enjoy it, but it's not a very satisfying explanation if what they enjoy is so the opposite of what all humans enjoy. So I guess what I'm saying is that I'm not saying that bad people don't exist, but I have to think that when people do things that are that extremely bad without reason, that they're simply it's a form of mental illness, that there's something
Yeah,
wrong in their brain, that by definition, like these are things humans don't do, and so there's something wrong. But I wouldn't say that there's this external force called evil that is working through them. I think it's a problem in their brain and body,
yeah,
presumably.
yeah. And a lot of people say, well, we're all capable of doing evil. And I really appreciate how you articulated that because really the hidden question is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. But the Alan Watts question, or quote, I would love you to respond to is before you answer, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy is if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. What do you think of that?
I think again that is something that depends on the context. Like I think that let's say that on this YouTube channel, there's someone who just every time you post, they just write something super mean in the comments and they're just always bothering you and they're like, I don't like your hair and I don't like your shirt and like they're just super mean. I think that acknowledging that enemy does empower them because it
Yeah,
does make them feel like they're getting to you.
yeah,
But when you have an enemy that's as large as, let's say, Donald Trump, like trying to destroy everything about like our way of life in our country and pillage everything for himself, like we can't not acknowledge him because
Yeah.
he already has power, you know, like
Yeah.
so it would be insane to not acknowledge him.
Yeah. And tomorrow's the day to show that. Really good that you brought that up, because really the follow up is Nassim Taleb saying games were created to give non heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. Gregory Bateson, the anthropologist, says if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff? Or does he go, oh, I did something morally and socially wrong? Basic question is, you can go wherever you want with the prompts, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
So this is something again that I would love to talk about with someone who studied it a lot more than me because I wonder about it too. But I feel like the answer is basically no. I mean, plenty of people commit crimes and commit them again, and eh, clearly, like the punishment itself, I don't know. I guess maybe some people do like commit a crime and then they go to jail and they say, "Hey, I don't want to go to jail again." But I feel like that's actually probably not very common, and it's more about um, whether whatever the crime is, like whether there are better alternatives, you
Yeah.
know, to committing that crime again.
Yeah. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, I think we get things out of both things, like going back to my answer about my favorite form of information being experiential, but I think that um, we don't usually get narratives or lessons presented to us in such a succinct way in real life as we do in a play or a movie. Um, because in a movie, you might witness a 50-year-long marriage and the whole course of it and how the relationship changes and blah, blah, blah. And that would take 50 years to experience in real life. And I think when we arrange information in the way that we do in plays, movies, books, the creator sort of intentionally is going to make something, they're going to provide information that leads to something. Whereas real life, not everything leads to anything at all. You know, like it's still good to look at a tree in real life, but looking at a tree in a movie might give you some different information as well. Like I love watching James Bending films. Like I find them really just like really relaxing and just I like how my brain goes anywhere and just like the freedom to like I don't have to get anything in particular out of this, so like my brain can just do whatever it wants, and it may be that like wow, I didn't notice that sparkle over there for the last 20 minutes that's been there, but it's like so even shots of just like it's a static shot of a hillside or a lake or whatever. I think there is a value in looking at it. Like, yes, looking at it in real life, maybe you're going to learn how the tree feels and how the tree smells and whether things are falling from it or whatever. But there's a different thing that you can learn from even just looking at a tree in a film. And it may not be as much about the tree as it is about like your own uh, brain and mechanisms of perception.
Yeah. It's like you expanded one of the longest films, Warhol's Empire State Building, 8 hours to like Bergman to the extreme. Scenes from a marriage for 50 hours, you watch the film. Or no, I mean, for 50 years, you watch the film.
Mhm.
That was funny. You can't watch a 50-year-old film. That would be amazing. Oh, we're going to watch this film for 50 years. That was beautiful. So tell me your tipping points to, you said earlier you pursued physics. What did you pursue in college? And then what was your tipping point to become an archivist? First, your tipping point to be physics, and then, art.
Yeah. So growing up, I always just loved math. I was always just a very like a natural at it. Like elementary school, I just whizzed through everything. I finished everything before all the other students, so I'd have to just sit there and do nothing. But anyways, I loved math. I just loved like the process of solving problems in my brain. And then as I got to high school and started to get to take physics, physics is sort of like just math applied, and I loved that. And really, though my AP physics teacher, Mr. Wong, was just like, he was so engaging. He was like the type of guy who would just like do headstands, like to demonstrate a point or whatever. And he went to University of Chicago, and he knew that how much I loved physics and how good I was at it compared, whatever. And he was like, "You want to go to University of Chicago too? Like, it's for you. It's like I loved it. You're gonna love it." And so I visited University of Chicago. I grew up just in the suburbs, so it was an hour away or whatever. And yeah, in fact, I did love it. It was exactly what I wanted, which is I got there and there's these Gothic buildings and there's all these students walking around and they're so like engrossed in their thoughts that they're like mumbling to themselves and just like, like everyone's just scholarly all the time. Like the social life is the library there, and everyone is just just they're all obsessed with getting more information and talking about it with everyone else. And like that was the environment I wanted to be in, because in high school I felt like I was one of the only people that wanted to learn and didn't just like use the cliff notes and just like try to minimize, like do the assignment without learning anything. So I wanted to go to this place that was truly for learners and intellectuals, people who wanted to know more about the world. And so I did go to University of Chicago, and I did study. And again, like I had been reading all the Carl Sagan and the Richard Feynman and all of this stuff, and just thinking about how the life of the mind and how exciting it would be to be a person who what you do with your life is just figure out more about the universe. But then, reality set in. I took physics and astronomy for about 3 years, and the started working in the astronomy department for this professor Don York. And he was a wonderful mentor, and let us all, his research assistants, have tons of autonomy and independence. But through working with Don, what I realized is that, your Carl Sagans, your Einsteins, these people are, way outliers. These are just like a tiny fraction of the physicists that exist. The bulk of the physicists that exist are someone who contributes just a tiny little bit to like our understanding of the universe. Like Don worked on maybe 3 or 4 major projects, but the one that I assisted on was researching diffuse interstellar bands, which are these molecules that you can detect in clouds that are in outer space. When you look at a star, and there's a cloud in between it, you can detect what's in the cloud by comparing a similar star that doesn't have a cloud. And so they start looking at what's in these clouds that are floating around in the universe. And the diffuse interstellar bands were these phenomenons where there was a molecule that they were detecting that they couldn't correspond with any molecule we find on Earth. And so the project, they were first detected in the 1930s. And by the time I was in college in the early 2000s, still no one knew what caused the diffuse interstellar bands. So the answer is basically it's a molecule that we don't have here, but they did find that out eventually, and it's just whatever. It's this molecule with all these many letters in it. But at any rate, what I'm saying is that Don and maybe 12 other people around the world worked on this for their entire careers, as did other people for decades and decades before them. And the thing that ultimately, like the best case scenario, is that they did figure out what it was. Some of the people who worked on it never figured out what it was, but that the best case scenario is that you solve this little piece that's of interest to the other 12 people working on the same thing. And
Yeah.
so that's not nothing, but what it means is like day in, day out, you have to really enjoy. I'm going to go to my computer that's going to be in the basement of the Astrophysics Center, because that's where the computers always are. And I'm just going to like get more data from the telescope, and I'm going to refine the data, and I'm going to output the data. And every day is going to be this same thing of just going through the data more. And This is sorry, this is a really long answer, but we have time. So simultaneously with realizing that an actual practicing scientist isn't really thinking about big picture questions all the time. Simultaneously, the physics and astro departments there were just very, very stressful. They, for some reason, wanted to actively push people out. Like they set the bell curve on a C so that every quarter people would fail out of the major. I don't know why they wanted fewer physics majors, but they did. So it was very competitive and stressful and pretty sexist. It was very hard to have people listen to you as a female. There were very few of us, like 3 or something. And it just, so then, cue to my end of my third year of college, I finally had time to take an elective. I think up until then, it was just like I needed to take these math and science in order to get everything done. But I finally had time for an elective. And so I guess somehow randomly, I don't really know how I chose it. I just picked this documentary filmmaking class with Judy Hoffman. And Judy was like the coolest person I'd ever met. She like dresses in all black. She's like got this bad attitude. She's always like, I don't know, she's just like a badass. She worked with Albert Maysles and Jean Rouch and was just always been very anti-establishment, early part of the Kartemquin Film Collective. And I realized through and taking her class that so the physics thing, as I said, it was like super, super hard. They were really trying to like make us fail, and our problem sets would take like 20 hours a week to do, blah, blah, blah. And I realized like, oh, there's this other way of being a college student or a professor or whatever. That's just you like watch some cool stuff and you talk about it with other people who also like it, and like that's the whole thing. Everything you see might be cool. Every day is going to be fun because you're going to watch some awesome thing you didn't know about. She had us reading all these manifestos, and it was just great. And most importantly, she taught me about the guerrilla television movement of the late 60s and 1970s when the portable video equipment first became available, and people like her, radicals, activists, started picking those cameras up with the idea that regular people were going to be able to make television and take control of mass media out of the hands of just the 3 networks that were beaming into everyone's homes every day. And I was fascinated by it and also astonished that like I'd never really heard of any of this, that my parents hadn't heard of it, that the vast majority of the works from this era were just still on tapes in people's basements or wherever, and no one could see them. And so I dropped physics and I became a film major and started studying under Judy to write my BA thesis, which was involved interviewing all the guerrilla television producers in Chicago, and writing a history of the groups and collectives and things that existed here, and trying to watch as many of the tapes as I could, which led me to Tom Weinberg, who founded Media Burn. And both he and Judy have been, the most important like mentors in over my life.
Well, no, that was a good summary of getting to medium burn. That was really good, because it's almost like, I'm going to ask this question soon about what's the difference between art and science, because you're the ultimate of going, but in essence, your art is documentary filmmaking. But here, before we get into that, I just want to ask you a few questions. First, just falling into that, calling of being an archivist, because it's funny. I've been in the midst of making a documentary on archiving for the last 2 years. So the word archive comes from 1400s. It means keep safe, free from harm. But 200 years later, it's what we kind of know it as, is a record or document preserved as evidence. In Charles Baudelaire, the poet says, if you try to make a statement long, deep, and rich, it will age very fast. If you try to only own the day you're talking, it will last forever. So that's the idea of, it's David Lee Roth saying, here today, gone later today. Isn't the point of life, like Ram Dass, Eastern philosophy, is to live in the moment? And you even mentioned that earlier, like live in the moment. So the question is, is this need or want to archive more innate or more invented? Because the Egyptians used to put stuff in their coffin with them. But, I'm all for the futurist, the Italian art movement that said destroy all the museums and libraries. Well, I don't like that idea. I go to a library every day, but I like that they thought it up, because if the whole point of life is to live at the moment, why do we have to save all this stuff? And, I know studying history is important, but it's sort of just this idea of overall, is archiving, do you think, more innate in humans or more invented?
I think it's innate. I think that most of us instinctually just see the value in maintaining information about the past, because I think that one of our goals in life is to sort of just keep expanding what we know and what we understand. And in order to do that, you need to have access to stuff from the past. I mean, like, um, if I only like I feel like living in the moment is important, but that doesn't mean I can't learn about the past. I think that if I only had access to information from 1981 onward, like my understanding about how everything in the world would be very, very limited. Like it's important to have access to things. Like I think some of the stuff in our archive that I think is the most important is stuff that just simply shows you like how did this particular person live in this particular place and time, like what was that experience like for them? Because like imagine if we had film or video of those ancient Egyptians, like we're
Yeah.
assuming many things about them, but we know nothing about like everything they did, the way they greeted someone, or like what they wore on a regular day, or what was in their
Yeah.
house, or if we had that, we would have such a fuller picture of that society than we do now.
Yeah. You have a hour-long tape of Paul Krasner, who was a friend of mine who I interviewed many times with all these stupid questions. And he always says, these are the same questions I asked all these people I interviewed, which was Tim Leary and everything. But it's amazing how you guys put on your website, these tapes for free. And then you also license them. So I really love that. And that goes to my next question is a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process as an archivist?
Um, okay, I think there's a lot of things to respond to there. I will just first say that to the first part of what you're talking about, I don't know whether or not to apply great to a piece of art, but I think that the art that I find most engaging is when I do not understand, when it's not readily apparent what the intent of the creator is. I think that if it's just like, this means this, so I got the message, I find that not very engaging. If I
Yeah,
need to continually think about why did they do this and what does it mean, like that's what I want. I want to have art make me work through all that.
yeah,
Um, so in terms of my own process, I mean, I well, okay, I have again, we'll have two opposite things here. I will say that obviously the process of archiving is necessarily intentional. You have a process and someone brings in a tape and then you're going to assign it a number and you're going to put it in a database and you're going to write information. Like obviously the process is very intentional and repeatable. Otherwise you wouldn't really be saving anything. But I will say that the where this sort of like unintentional the unintentional has had a role, I think, in our practice a lot. I think that as a institution, many organizations have a very narrow collecting policy, and I think it frustrates people sometimes that we're like, we take anything that's videotape, like as long as we think it's interesting and worth, like we don't have a very set, like just videotape basically. And beyond that, we sort of decide what fits. I think we know it when we see it, but what I'm saying is that that attitude of openness and not being so intentional about what we collect has led us to collect things that we didn't initially think were valuable that
Yeah.
turned out to some people to be extremely valuable. Like there was this day when our founder, Tom Weinberg, was bringing over these tapes he'd found somewhere in a storage space. And they were from this program that he and his collaborator, Elon Soltes, had tried to make in the early 80s, a show about technology. And they shot some footage, they put together like a pilot, and they tried to pitch it to networks. No one bought it. So they didn't make anything. So you just had all this B-roll and raw tapes from this failed show. And we were like, well, what should we do? Like we were literally like kind of like almost held the boxes over the garbage can, and we're like, we don't need this, it's just B-roll or whatever. And then we were like, no, let's just keep it. Fine, we'll archive it. Let's put the stickers on, put them in. And that footage that 20 years ago we thought was just unimportant has been, I think, some of the most viewed and most popular in our collection. Like
Wow.
a video that's just B-roll of the Ms. Pac-Man factory making those consoles that has gotten like 1 million views. Like people really want to see sometimes like how things work, how things were done,
Right.
that they can no longer see. And so the lesson there, and it's happened with other videos as well, the lesson is really just like, I don't know everything, and there's
Yeah.
like so many people out in the world that have different uses for what we have. So there's no need to limit ourselves that much. Obviously, we have a finite amount of staff, a finite amount of time in the world, but just err on the side of letting things slip in and seeing what
But
happens.
it seems as though it goes back to your saying your hunch or your guess or your gut feeling, because just the way you described it, holding it over the garbage can. I've talked to some of the greatest archivists in LA, and they say, no, we have to be discerning because we can only take so much. I mean, the biggest archive going is George Lucas's Museum of Narrative Art, and it's like, he's got a gazillion-dollar budget. How hard is it to get in there? I mean, I got lucky. I got my interview archives into interview audio tapes into an archive that also took my Pixel Video Festival. It's 35 years, and that's all VHS tape, which was growing mold. So, UCLA and USC says, oh, we'll take them. And I says, well, some of these tapes have mold. Nope, we won't take them. And then, the Academy took them, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. But it is funny because this is the question. The follow-up is Duchamp saying there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your viewer, your user, when you're archiving? Because in that sense, you're holding that tape over the garbage can. Where's your head going for the user? Because the other big thing is, I work with the museums for our hometown, Venice, California. And one of the guys kind of doesn't like going into the archives because it's too sacred. And, it's people with white gloves and like, okay, you can't have that. And, why are you saving all this if the people can't use it? Just the people who get budgets to make documentaries get to see it. So any thoughts on that? Just there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your million viewers in that case when you're archiving? Like that decision to keep or that, was that a thinking of the viewer or thinking of what?
I think we well, so I'll just say that I think the whole reason Media Burn was founded was to make the content available to wide audiences. Like that
Yeah,
was sort of Tom's thought,
yeah,
that like he had been
yeah,
working as part of this guerrilla television movement and public television, trying to find space for alternative voices on television. And so
yeah,
around the early 2000s, he realized like, okay, the internet is going to actually be that thing that we wanted, cable access, public television, that we wanted to happen on television. And so the whole point of it was I think, if we had to choose one, if we had to say, were we doing it to preserve things, to save them, or so that people watch them? I would say it's so that people watch them. Was, if we had to choose one or the other, it was really to show people stuff.
yeah. That's
Um,
really beautiful. Tom has a great attitude. That's great. But is Tom still living?
yeah,
Oh, great. I want to interview him. That's
yeah.
really cool. That's an amazing attitude, you know. And so, what's the difference between art and science? Is there
Um,
a, is there a difference, and if so, what is it?
yeah, I would say that probably the definition of science sort of resides in the scientific method, in that everything you do needs to be repeatable, verifiable by others, and um, you need to follow certain rules, otherwise the conclusions are not going to be valid. And I think in art, you can definitely follow rules if you want to. So there, schools have set up rules for how do you compose a shot, or like, whatever, like how to use a paintbrush well or something. But you can, unlike in science, you can completely throw that out and still make a piece of art. You can do the opposite of all those rules and often make even more interesting art.
Yeah, that's funny because McLuhan said James Joyce solved problems which weren't even formulated as problems yet, which is
Mhm.
exactly what Tony Conrad said. Artists break rules that aren't even made, that don't even exist yet. So, but I was curious your reaction to Jean Cocteau. Art is science made clear.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I would say that often art is, the function of art. So the function of science is to simply investigate and present facts, whereas the art goes beyond that to take the information we have, um, and interpret it for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now to truth, because you brought up the word truth earlier. Louis Buñuel says, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. Now, that's an interesting quote. Most people go, that's good. And then one person said, no, that's bullshit, because if I'm seeking something, it's because I want to find it. So I morphed it into the question, if the journey's more important than the destination, why do we have to seek or name a destination?
Well, I guess, um, having a destination simply, I think, takes your next step, the thing you do next, down from an infinite amount of things into something you can picture. And so I think that often when I need to do a task or produce, write something, whatever it is, having a set of rules to guide me makes it possible for me to begin and to do it, in a way that not having infinite options sort of paralyzes a person.
Yeah, because it's also funny the paradox, and you're willing to embrace contradiction like that, is that these people sat around in Paris in the 20s, like Hemingway and Picasso and Joyce, and they just did nothing. They were called flaneurs or psychogeography. They just, like Joyce said, you can find an epiphany in everydayness, and you can just wander aimlessly and have have an insight.
Hmm.
Shelby Foote said, a fact is not a truth until you love it. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with it. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that.
I would say there are plenty of facts that I hate. Um, so that would be my initial response, is that
Yeah,
there are a multitude of things that are undeniably true in the world that I actively despise.
yeah. And then Marcel Proust's question is, on what occasion do you lie?
I guess I very often lie to avoid people's feelings getting hurt.
Yeah,
And the reason is because I don't want to spend time with them. I feel like I said in the beginning, I really feel like, yeah, it's not worth spending time doing things that I don't want to do. And a lot of the time I am actually pretty upfront with my friends of like, I don't feel like doing, I don't want to, I have something else I'd rather do. But sometimes it requires a lie to get
Yeah.
out of it to avoid hurting someone's feelings.
What's more important, Sarah, conviction or compromise?
I think compromise. I think that just like you were saying about admiring the search for truth, but not trusting anyone who says they found it. I think that there are very few things in life that are completely black and white, and conviction kind of implies that you have come to a conclusion and you will not change. And I think that one of the things that I was emphasized a lot in my college education at University of Chicago, but I also think is just as important as a human, is to come up with, you have things you've decided and continually reevaluate them based on new information and be willing to change at all times if someone persuades you to, or if the evidence persuades you to. And similarly, compromise kind of implies that you're dealing with another person or many people. And I think that we all live in a society together and everything we do is intertwined, and everything in our lives needs to be a compromise that so that we can all get as close as we can to what we need and want, because there's very few instances in which everything is a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. There's no right or wrong answers to any of my questions, but that one you got right. What do you think the motive of the cave artist was? Your hunch or your guess?
I mean, again, I would assume that maybe people have actually like proposed like real theories about this, scientists who study this, but my hunch would be it seems like, I mean, I know almost nothing about cave drawings, but it seems like they typically represent the natural world, like prey, and or like formations. And so both probably to convey information that was required for survival
Yeah.
mostly, as well as to convey information that should be passed down from one generation to another.
Yeah. T.S. Eliot said poetry's outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
um I don't know. I mean, I guess um in general, just sort of mostly incomplete sentences unless it becomes images. I don't know.
Complete sentences and images. That's really good. A filmmaker, you check her film, Abigail Childs. She made the film about Emma Goldman, really good film. And she's an experimental filmmaker. I says, what language is your inner dialogue in? She goes, I wish I knew. But two of my film heroes, George Manupelli says, ignore yourself. Jonas Mika says, there's no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more your vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
um, I think both, but I would say predominantly the latter, because when you look at like the history of art, you see how um people tend to create works that are fairly similar to each other in the same place in the same time, because they have access to the same tools and access to the same culture and knowledge. Um, like you don't have a Warhol in the 1600s or something like that. Like
Yeah,
you just, I think that even though people are very creative, that we're so influenced by what we can do with what we have and by just our shared
yeah,
cultural experience.
really heavy because I'm really been obsessed with two Chicago artists for years, Henry Darger and who's that street photographer woman, whatever,
Oh, Vivian Meyer.
Vivian, I have this whole lecture where I think they crossed paths in the middle of the street and they ran into each other. But Henry Darger was written up in the New York Times when he broke big. And they said he was doing pop art before Rauschenberg and Warhol because he stuck a picture of Joe Namath from the newspaper in the middle of one of his watercolors before they were doing. I mean, collage goes back to Kurt Schwitter and it goes way back, but in that sort of pop, it's a fine line, but I loved it. Like Henry was doing pop art before Andy Warhol. That idea is just, mind blowing to me. I love it. And so that vehicle thing was well expressed. But really, Sara, the hidden question is, can art making be egoless?
I mean, I'm not an artist, but I would sort of say that it is too impossible to detach yourself from yourself in whatever you do. And I mean, to be honest, I mean, there's people like Henry Darger who are probably creating things for just very personal reasons, but the majority of art is created as part of this commercial system that
Yeah,
we've set up. And the majority of artists, I think, are very much conscious of that and thinking about that this is a thing that I'm making in order to sell for money.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you can't
so
separate that. But that's amazing because the cave artist could have been, I'm doing my art so I can get some people to come over to my cave and eat grapes and cheese together, food together and hang out and have friends. But I love it because, when they Henry's just about to die and these people go in his apartment and find out that he has all this art. Now, how could they not have seen him carrying art supplies in there? It's a hard story to suss out, and there's been millions of books and articles, but my favorite line in the movie is great about Henry, but my favorite line is the guy goes to Henry's deathbed and he goes, "Dude, we found your art," and Henry goes, "It's too late now." Now, did he mean it's too late? I wanted to destroy all that and not let you see it, or it's too late because you guys are going to cash in and make a lot of money off me, and I'm not going to be able to get any of the rewards of the money. Now, that's probably not it because he was just making art because he was driven to make art. But who knows? He might have thinking, well, maybe someone will, you know, buy one of my books someday. It's, and that's the beauty of art is that the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can. That's McLuhan line. You can say, "Oh, I'm doing my art so I can make my living," but maybe deep inside you're doing it because that's what you're driven to do, you know. And it's not
mhm.
just it's your lifestyle. So anyway, sorry to go up. Is perception reality?
No, I mean, there are like so many things that we can't perceive. There's sounds that are outside of the range of our hearing. There's just many things that there's only a certain set of things we as humans can perceive, and different animals can perceive different things. And there are many things that exist even though we can't perceive them.
Yeah. Tell me one major element of your archiving career that's changed and one major element that stayed the same. I mean, how many years you been archiving about?
Like 20 plus,
20
yeah.
years. That's pretty cool. Now, what do you think is one major thing that stayed the same, one major thing that's changed?
I think what stayed the same is really just my excitement in this work. I think that there's it's still well, the type of stuff that we have, which is sort of like independently produced tapes that like are have not been made into movies, that are necessarily for TV. It's still like it's still not even a genre that necessarily exists, like that people don't. And I think that what I still I still feel just as passionate about this content as I always did, and just like so excited to get new tapes and find out what's on them and watch them and share them with other people and just like try to show other people just how cool this stuff is. I think that has not changed at all. That what has changed, I think, is awareness. Like I'm saying, it's still marginal, but it's a lot less marginal. I feel like these types of work from the video era are a lot more studied and written about, and it's a lot more normal to mention TV to someone and have them know who that is than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah. No, I was lucky. I knew Nancy Kane, Paul Kreisner's wife, and we showed that stuff. And I've interviewed and talked to the TV people. And my favorite is they were going to shoot Bob Dylan. They made the Bob Dylan ABC TV special. And Bob went to their house in Malibu, and they're saying, "Hey, look at this video camera," And he was like, "Wow, cool." And they put it down on its side, and it was, it wasn't up like this; it was like that. And Bob was just infatuated. Bob Dylan was like, "Wow, look at that!" It'd be like me doing a Zoom with you like this and going, "Wow."
Yeah, I think John Lennon. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah.
No, John Lennon, I think, was very interested in video. He had a Portapack as well. And we even have footage of Studs Terkel, the oral historian and journalist and broadcaster and actor and wonderful Chicagoan. We have video of him showing video camera to Nelson Algren, the Chicago writer, and just talking about how incredible video was. It's exciting to me when people are...
Stud's my hero. And you got all the early computer guy, Dan, Dean? What's his name?
Dan
Sandine. I mean, you got a lot. It's really beautiful what you guys are doing. So here's another one, Sara. And Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
I don't know that I can say that I have done this. I mean, I can see, for example, just in terms of like the body, if you say like, well, my arms aren't very strong, so I'm going to lift a lot of weights and then my arms are going to be very strong. But I don't, in terms of like metaphorically, I feel like I have only not turned weaknesses into strength, but simply just managed to like mitigate weaknesses. Like I used to be really nervous about like talking in front of people, and you do it a lot of times and you no longer feel nervous, but that doesn't mean, well, it doesn't mean it was a weakness to begin with, and it doesn't mean it's a strength now. I don't know. I mean, do other people have other people had interesting answers to that?
Oh, I've had in 40 years, 1,000 interviews, I've had 1,000,000. But that's what you just said. It is, if you're not a great public speaker and you start doing it and you've learned how to do it, give me another word to describe mitigate. What does that word mean to you in another word or two? Because I like that word.
I guess I'm implying that it's something that can't be completely solved, but can be partially remedied, that you can take steps to to lessen the impacts of.
Yeah. No, that's good. Well, the one I always give is Iggy Pop said his band was so bad imitating the Rolling Stones, they invented punk rock. But I mean, it's endless. I mean, it's really the main thing McLuhan learned from James Joyce's book, Finnegan's Wake, is how do you turn a breakdown into a breakthrough? I mean, you guys had some hunch. You're holding this tape over the garbage can. The breakdown is, hey, this is crap. The breakthrough was, let's give it a chance and throw it on the shelf. So we're constantly doing that. We're constantly turning, like, the cliche is turn a lemon into lemonade. That's sort of. Yeah.
And I think that a lot of us did that during the pandemic. A lot of us had a thing that we used to do every day for
Yeah.
a year, 10 years,
Yeah.
20 years, that's something we had always done and suddenly couldn't do and had to gradually figure out new things to do. So like for me, I'd been a swimmer for about 10 years before that, which I started because I hurt my foot from running. So another lemonade thing. But couldn't swim in pools for a year or something. They were all closed. And I started swimming in Lake Michigan. Well, first random rivers and lakes because Lake Michigan was closed, but started open water swimming and eventually now, I mean, learned just how much I love it. And I am obsessed with it. It's like my reason for being. It makes me happy every day. I go in year round. I never would have thought that a cold plunge would be so exhilarating, but it's like taking a drug. It like literally improves your like your mood just is raised.
Oh,
And
no.
like when I can't get in the lake, I'm so unhappy. I like just I don't even want to go out of town because I want to be in the lake every day. So
Well, that's a perfect example. But I have to ask you, we got about 10 more minutes. Can you go longer or do you have to run?
no, I'm fine. I don't have anything.
Okay. So that's good. I appreciate it because that's a great example. Interviewing people, I would have to say, well, Sara, are you going to come to LA or I might be in Chicago? I mean, over the last 4 years, I've done 700 interviews because the COVID forced me to go online.
Hmm.
And here's the funny thing. If me and you were sitting in a room and I had my little tape recorder and I was doing this interview, both of our eyes would wander more often. Zoom makes you be more present. And people don't like to hear that because I do public meetings all the time and I do some of them only on Zoom now. And they're like, oh no, we want to do it live. I goes, no, I've set up folding chairs for 40 years. I'm not beyond that now. Zoom enables people from all over. Yeah, I
Yeah.
interviewed a woman in the Ukraine and she goes, well, I might be bombed in the middle of the interview. I says, oh,
Wow.
okay, well, and we did it and it felt like you're next door to me, like right
Hmm.
now. So that is a great example of how do you turn a breakdown, COVID and the pandemic, into a breakthrough.
Hmm.
But the next one is fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive emotion when.
I think when it causes you to take action against injustice.
So Utah Phillips says anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Entitled to make the rules?
Well, I mean, I think that is one of the biggest questions that we have as humans. But with the sort of like University of Chicago is known for this like core curriculum where you sort of like one of which was this class called I don't know what it like social inquiry or so I don't know. We just called it Soch. I don't remember what Soch stood for. But basically for a year, you sort of read throughout history people basically answering the question, whether it's like Aristotle, whether it's Locke and Rousseau, all these people basically are answering the same question of like, what is the nature of humans and how do we structure a society that works? You know, are humans naturally going to be sort of altruistic and we need limited organization, or are, you know, humans inherently terrible and self-interested and we need to create societies, you know, like rules to prevent us from being terrible to each other. Um, and I no longer remember the
Well,
question. I think I just,
no, but yeah, you taught me so much in just summarizing it. That's the important thing. I always go, you don't have to answer the question. I just want to learn. I just want to learn something new. But that was really heavy. But the question is who's entitled to make the rules? Now, the question itself has a problem because the word entitled, it's like I don't want to say who should make the rules. I could say that. Who makes the rules? Well, we know who makes the rules, or we kind of have a hunch. But I just say who's entitled to make the rules to make it sort of fleshed out as a bigger. But that word entitled carries a little too much baggage too.
Well, I think it was the word entitled that led me to thinking
Yeah,
about those thinkers because they were primarily, I think, saying what kind of government should we set
yeah,
up?
yeah,
And so the
that's
answer would basically be that the people who are entitled under the framework in which we live
yeah.
in this democracy is our elected officials, I guess.
Yeah, and so that's funny because the word freedom etymologically breaks down to the very thing Utah said, giving oneself one's own laws. So what does freedom mean to you now?
Um, well, I mean, I think one thing that you're saying resonates with me that um, uh, when like libertarians talk about the concept of freedom, they seem unwilling to acknowledge when my freedom is impinging on someone else's freedom. Like my freedom to pollute the environment as much as I want is might be
Yeah,
infringing on the right of someone else to breathe clean air. Um, and I think have lost what the question was, something about freedom or
yeah.
anarchy or
What does freedom mean to you now?
oh, well, it's a tough question. Just given the political situation that we are and thinking about what things may or may not change, but I guess I would mainly think of it as the ability to chart the course of my own life and
Yeah,
yeah, choose what I'm doing sort of on a large scale as well as like an
yeah,
individual moment scale.
yeah. And it's like I wanted to say someone once told me libertarians are pot smoking Republicans. But it's funny because what does freedom mean to me now? Like tomorrow, do I want to go stand at a street corner in Venice and have some crazy mow us down with their car, which is not likely, or some cop shoot me with a rubber bullet? I'm too old for that. I don't want to do that, but I'm going to go anyways because we're like, a nice little town and hopefully that won't happen. But like in your town, that's a little different, you know, right? That would be scary to go out. And then people are like, I'm going to the bigger city to do it. And I'm like, not me. I'm going to stay in my puny little town and where I won't be hurt, which is like, you know, is it going to make a difference? Anyways, what's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
Um, that is a good question because outside of the physical and assuming that the physical can encompass things like men have more testosterone and women have more estrogen and those lead to certain traits whether they're emotional or physical. um Once you take that out, I have a question of whether or not there are differences or
Yeah.
whether they're entirely culturally taught.
Yeah.
um
That's the
I
answer I most want to hear is people go, there is none. But
Mhm,
we know there is, but it
mhm,
is basically physical has a lot to do with it, and physical so intertwined with cultural.
mhm.
So there, this one's kind of stupid. I'll ask it anyways. What caused matriarchy?
Um, I don't know a lot about scenarios where matriarchies exist, but I tend to think of them as places where men have been absent, or there's just more of an emphasis on sort of child rearing and child care.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's great. Peter Sellers, the great theater director, I says, what caused matriarchy? He says, a mother holding a baby. And that's what
Yeah.
it is. This is when women are nurturing, so they don't want to have war. I wrote an essay, Can Art Stop War? And it's all about Maria Gimbutas and Rian Eisler saying we're more hardwired to be cooperating than we are to have war and violence. But most people like go, oh, that war was needed. I was like, no, it wasn't. You can't rationale war and violence. And that's all
Mhm.
we've done since, I mean, anyways, this goes along a little. Is there's a line that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. And James Joyce said it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So, any thoughts, Sarah, on this line? You create what you resist. And I'm not saying you, that one creates what one
Mhm.
resists. Any thoughts on that line?
I mean, I do think that one thing that I feel like I picked up on from movies or whatever, just like at a young age, is that people who have a thing that they really hate or are really paranoid about, like if there's a movie and this guy is obsessed that he thinks his wife is cheating on him, it's usually because he's cheating on her, or
Yeah.
someone is
Yeah.
obsessed with hating gay people, it's because they have a fear that they're gay deep
Yeah.
down or something like
Yeah.
that. So I think there's a lot of truth to
Yeah.
that things that fear that you hate things because you fear them. If you don't fear them, you just don't care about them enough to hate them.
Yeah. These are 5 quick Alan Watts questions off the top of your head in just a couple words. 1, who started it all?
Nobody. The Big Bang.
Very good. 2, are we going to make it?
Yes, I hope so.
3, where do we put it?
In the archive.
What an answer. That's my kind of answer in the arc. No one said that in all these years. That's great. 4, who's cleaning it up?
Next generation.
5, is it serious?
Yeah, I think it's very serious.
Okay, really good. A few more and we're out of here. This has really been fun, Sarah. Thank you. How do you find peace of mind?
Um, Yeah, I mean, I think that it really comes from this swimming thing. I think that
Yeah,
being in water, so Lake Michigan is, I always have to, I always have to explain this to Europeans how large it is, that it's so vast you can't see across. It's the size of a sea. And so going to the lake every day and looking out over the lake and looking at the sky and the sun and being immersed in this giant body of water, um, and sort of, especially when it's cold, the fact that you're experiencing this cold kind of takes over your body is reacting to it, and
yeah.
it pushes out your thoughts because you're thinking just about this sort of survival. And I think that this practice of doing this every day is really what keeps me sane.
Beautiful. I have to ask you one question. Do you wear a wetsuit in the winter?
Yeah, so there's like so I do like swims, and if I'm gonna swim for 20 or 30 minutes, I'm gonna wear a wetsuit. But I also might just do a plunge and then I wouldn't wear a wetsuit because it's not really worth, if you're gonna go in for a minute, it's not worth putting it on, taking it off, standing out there wet and in the cold and all
Right.
that.
Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
I think that I don't care, and I think that people should not think about things that are that trivial. I
Very
think people use it as an excuse to have fights with their spouse, and you should not be arguing about things like that with your spouse or
yes.
anyone.
I love it. That was a great answer. Um, if a publisher is going to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't envision anyone reading my autobiography.
Well,
Um,
okay, but they want to put a scent in the glue in the binding of your book. What smell would it be?
I guess like fresh air.
Fresh air. Good. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Um, I guess I would want it displayed along Lake Michigan and made of. Uh, I don't care. It could be maybe made with natural things that will gradually decay and disappear over time. I'd be fine with that. It doesn't have to last
Cool.
forever.
Cool. Tell me something good you never had, but you never want.
Well, I guess I don't know if I think it's good, but I would say fame is something that many people think is good that I would never want. I think that I don't know, there's especially, being, out in LA, you probably see many, many people who are motivated by striving for fame, and I just can't possibly imagine
Yeah.
how that brings one anything positive to one's life. It seems like it robs you of your freedom.
Yeah. It's funny that the answer I get the most, three answers: fame, money, and heroin.
Heroin? Yeah, okay.
That
No,
is
I get no. I've definitely expressed the feeling in my life that I'm just very glad that I never was in a position to try
right.
heroin or
Yeah,
similar drugs. Yes, that is
I agree.
also.
What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Well, work with a decent amount of young people. We have a lot of like work study students that work here and classes that come through and stuff. And I feel like young people today are so willing to like advocate for themselves. Like I feel like my generation and generations before, if there was something different about you, um, this was something you were ashamed of. You didn't want anyone to know that you had trouble reading, or you didn't, like whatever. If you like had some problem where you couldn't carry stuff, you would try to just do it anyways. You didn't want to be a problem to other people, and I feel like that impulse is completely gone. Like people don't feel ashamed saying like, this is a reality that I have, and let's work to accommodate it. And I think that's very healthy.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Can you forget to die?
I think that you can forget about the fact that you're going to die, and that is probably the one of the best ways to live. I mean, simultaneously, you kind of need to know that life is finite in order to appreciate it. But advanced worrying doesn't help at all. Like my dad, well, my mom had cancer for 10 years and my dad had cancer for 6 years, more when I was an adult. I'm going to talk about my dad. And so he had stage 4 lung cancer for 6 years. And so for that whole 6 years, we're preparing for the fact that he's going to die, right? And you're just worried about it and worried about, like I have a disabled sister. I'm worried about I'm going to have to take care of my disabled sister once he dies, and what's going to happen to this, and like who's going to be the liaison with our relatives, and how am I going to get information about blank if my dad's not here. And through the course of my dad dying, my mom dying, other people dying, every time it's been the case. I don't know how you stop doing it, but the worst part of the whole thing is the part where you're worried about them dying much more than them being dead.
Yeah,
And it's something that I would love to be able, like, it's what I strive for in life, is to try to avoid worrying about things before they happen. I don't think it's not achievable, but I
yeah.
think it's the ultimate goal.
It's really good. I aspire to that myself, and I appreciate you articulating it. Tell me a question that remains unresolved for you.
Um, I mean, just what is happening in the world right now?
Yeah,
Are we entering a dictatorship, a period of terrible repression where uh, everyone we know and care about is going to be jailed or killed? Or
yeah,
is this just another, like, is it just another shitty 4 years of a Republican, and
yeah.
we'll just go change later?
Big question, really well. Okay, how has archiving, 20 years of archiving, shaped your behavior? That whole world you entered into these last 20 years, how has it shaped your behavior?
I think that the process of watching so much archival video and documentary video and experimental video, I think that just watching all of that video has just made me understand the world better. Like, one of the first collections that I worked on, 20 years ago was, our founder, Tom, had shot this documentary about an alderman named Vito Marzullo, who was one of the big, powerful people in the Chicago machine during the Daley era. And so he made the documentary. It's an hour or whatever. But then I was digitizing and cataloging all of the raw footage. So he shot 40 or 50 hours of footage to make the documentary. And so this was from 1978, and it's just there's footage of just hours and hours in Marzullo's ward office where constituents come in and they say, I need this pothole fixed, my brother-in-law needs a job, I'm having this problem. And you see like how he treats different people, how different people approach him, who gets the pothole fixed, who is told to fuck off. And you see him meeting with his aides, you see him at the city council meetings, and just all of this of just seeing what does the inside of his office look like, how do people talk to each other, all of this was like the biggest education in Chicago politics, in politics in general, in history, that I ever had. And so over the course of 20 years, I've just had more and more of those things able to accumulate, just more and more things that I know about simply through watching footage.
Yeah. Because do you have Tom Palazzola's footage? I went to the Ann Arbor Film Festival for 30 years, and he used to be the darling of the festival. All his Nazi parades in Chicago. Now I hear he gets to sell his footage, as a stock footage, and he gets to make a little money. But have you watched his footage, or do you guys have any in your archive?
Yeah, we have tons and tons. He's constantly sending us more tapes that I don't know where he gets them out from, but he's constantly re-editing his pieces too, which can be a little frustrating to some people besides him. But he is, I think, one of the most charming and enjoyable people that I know, and his pieces are the same. I think that very few people make videos, documentaries, let's say, sort of a mix of documentary and experimental, that just have the sense of like playfulness that he has, which he has both in photography and film. I asked him if I could buy a photo from him, and he refused to sell me a photo, but he sent me a photo. And it's this photo he took at a parade in downtown Chicago in like the 60s. And there's this man dressed in like a suit, just formal, like old time guy, and he's standing, and behind him there is a giant inflatable octopus, just giant, dominating the whole screen, and the guy is completely unaware of this huge octopus behind him. And that is like just so typical of a Tom Palazzolo image and his sensibility. I love everything about Tom, and I love his films.
Well, Sarah, if there's any way you can hook me up, I'd love to interview both Toms.
Oh, sure.
With both, at some point. But I wanted to veer off for a second before my last two questions, if you don't mind. And it's this back to Faulkner saying sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. That's an interesting thing. So, you talked about Maisels and Pennebaker and all the great documentarians in America, sort of, and then Barbara Koppel made it in my era. You could go see a doc in a movie theater, and then Michael Moore made it even more popular. And so we've had this slew of docs informing us and entertaining us. And then someone told me recently that James Joyce, who's, it's like the Bible, Shakespeare and Joyce are the greatest books ever, said, Joyce said something like, leave storytelling to journalists, because he was more interested in elaborating the extraordinary, even though a lot of his stuff is, Ulysses, voted the greatest book ever, is just a guy walking around Dublin. Nothing happens, really. I mean, a few things happen. But then you go to these three documentarians, like Frederick Wiseman, sometimes treated as the, most pure documentarian in America. I've talked to him. I said, and what he says, my work is reality fiction. And then Alan King, who's sort of like the Wiseman of Canada, says actuality dramas. And then Ricky Leacock says his stuff is historical fantasies. So, I mean, if you can just talk a little about this sense that you're in a medium that's probably, I mean, more of your archives is what's called documentary, isn't it? Or, yeah,
Mhm.
so you're in a medium that's more documentary, yet you might be feeding to people who are making, now feature films in Hollywood use documentary footage. My friend ran, Oddball Cinema in San
Mhm.
Francisco. He sold one clip to Harvey Milk Film that paid his rent for the whole year, because it
Wow.
was some, real footage of a gay parade in San Francisco. So
Mhm.
any thoughts just on that? I mean, I don't know where you want to go or what I'm asking really, but this sense of this line between, is fiction a better way? Not a better way. Fiction is a way to teach and enlighten people, but documentary is also. So just navigating the two, any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, first I will say that I just love movies and I like watching all of them. So I think it's
Yeah,
great that we have the whole spectrum of things that we have because I learn from both
yeah,
equally. I mean, it's definitely true what a lot of those documentarians were pointing out that obviously even these cinema verite people, like it's a construction, they
yeah,
are showing you certain things, they're not showing you others, and they're showing them to you in a particular order that causes you to have particular thoughts. So it's definitely like um documentaries are never objective, they may strive towards it, but like they're never going to be objective. But I think that one way to strive towards that even more that we value is one of the things that we make available through MediaBurn is, like I said, all that camera original footage. It's not very common to see that in archives to make that available, but through watching that camera original footage, you can you can both, like, if you want to interrogate what happened in the documentary, you can say like, okay, did that person just come up with that statement out of nowhere, or were they prompted, and how were they prompted to say
yeah,
that thing? So you can check for some of the biases in like an interview. You can watch things unfold in real time to see what happened before something, what happened after something, and it gets you, again, someone had to choose when to turn the camera on and when to turn it off and which way to point it.
yeah,
But at least watching the camera original footage, you can remove editing, which is, I think, the bigger way that a filmmaker is going to construct the
yeah,
information for you. Um, all that is to say is, like you were saying, truth, useful information and truths about the world can be conveyed through fiction quite
yeah,
well, So it's not necessarily a problem that documentary can't be completely objective.
yeah. Yeah, really heavy. You brought up a lot because I saw no, I saw Pennebaker at UCLA talking to a bunch of film students. And he goes, uh, don't ever get permission and don't ask people to shoot him. And, Chris, his partner, just hits him and goes, you can't say that anymore. So just that alone, when people know they're being filmed. I mean,
Hmm.
you brought up Joan Roosh, and he says, when I put a camera between me and you, it's more true than if there's no camera. That sounds ridiculous, but it is in a way. Is it a heightened reality or is it reality? But the other one you really got me was one of my favorite is Peter Davis made a film called Hearts and Mind. And it's one of the greatest films about the, anti-Vietnam War era. And he said, the biggest thing about a documentary filmmaker is when to turn the camera off.
Hmm.
And so I was being shot once, and this guy said, oh, my chip just ran out. And I goes, okay, you want me to stop talking? And he goes, yeah, no, keep talking because my other chip is recording you on sound. So,
Hmm.
I mean, the way it changed, over the years on how much you can get, all that. And then you go to Edmund Carpenter, who I studied through McLuhan's world. He was the first supposedly anthropologist who gave the camera to the subject so they could film instead of me being the entitled white guy coming into a primitive area and filming these people. And then, you got Joshua Oppenheimer, filming people and then showing the film to them and having them react to the footage. So that you taught me this amazing line, camera original footage. I mean, that's the other thing. I think it was Pennebaker said, don't ever use fast forward. So, people get this camera original footage and go, oh, that's the shot. And then they ignore watching all. You might find a real gem if you sit there and watch tons of hours of footage and you thought, oh, that didn't come out good, or that wasn't good. And then all of a sudden the patience to sit there. So that was really.
That's, I think, what excited me about video as a medium for making documentary. When you look at the documentaries that were made on film, like in the 60s, it's very, very constructed. Their reels are 10 minutes long or something like that. They have to bring in lights that hugely, they have to bring in lights. The camera itself makes tons and tons of noise. Very often they are like telling people to do something and then turn on the camera, or they're waiting till a certain moment because they can't afford to waste the film. And so when video came about and they didn't need lights to go into places, the cameras didn't make a lot of sound, they could shoot as much as they want because they could just record over it if they needed to, and the tapes didn't cost very much, and there was no processing, and they could show it to people immediately. I think that changed documentary and opened up a lot more interesting things. Obviously, many interesting things were done before too, but a lot of much more interesting ways of documenting life with a camera.
Yeah. And the bias is the topic you choose. Right there's a bias because in Nanook of the North, the guy had him, oh, could you build that igloo again? And we know his motive was, hey, it's a medium I can make money with. But he did a great film, and it's an important film. And then you fast forward to Herzog paying people to do stuff over and over in a documentary. Is that ethically or morally correct? It's like, well, what's the difference of if you buy a burrito for a homeless person and you're filming them, you're giving them? But I mean, I think it's all debatable. And the big one I've asked for years to documentary filmmakers came from that doc in Brazil. 2 street kids are beating the shit out of each other. Do you put your camera down and stop the fight, or do you film it so you can tell the world this is what's going on and we might have to address this problem, or should we address this problem? So that's another big question. What do you do? Is it your duty as a human to put your camera down, or, so
I mean, I can see both sides of the argument, but I have always sort of felt shocked that someone doesn't put their camera down.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things that I think it was very important that they were documented. Like it changed the world that we saw Rodney King beaten on television. But at the same time, I can't imagine in that scenario feeling like it was more important, not that scenario, but like many scenario like described, feeling like it was better for me to stand back and film it than to
intervene. No, Sarah, I cry every time I say this. That woman who shot the guy who killed the guy with the knee, what's that guy's name? The black guy, she was a young black girl, and the guy what's the guy's name, who died? The cop killed him by putting his knee on his I should remember.
George Floyd, or was that?
Yeah, George Floyd. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that black teenage girl who shot that 8 minutes. Do you know this? I said we should have gave her the Oscar for best cinematography because she said it ruined her life because she felt so bad that she didn't put her camera down and stop it. It's like, girl, You did way better, because if you tried to put your camera down and stop it, they would have fucking killed you. Or
Right.
you could have been injured. So somehow she felt, I'm going to hold this shot for 8 minutes and change the world. Well, she didn't say she was going to change the world. In her head, we don't know what but somehow it, she felt that was important, and that footage was amazing, So again, she didn't go to documentary film school. I mean, that's why it's changing now to citizen journalism is so important.
Yeah,
But
for sure. And I guess like I think the thing that separates those is if you have an opportunity to document the powerful committing an injustice, probably your role is going to be to document, because you
yeah,
probably are not going to be able to intervene. I think the thing that shocks me more is when people go into like war zones or places where people are starving and they just shoot images of these people who need water and food
yeah,
and whatever, when it's like you could just give them the water and the food,
yeah.
but
No,
maybe they
that's a
do
really
that
good
also.
point. I worked with the documentary filmmaker here in LA, and he made a film where he got to go into the US government's archive to see war footage. And we ended up showing one of the programs I'm most proud of in 40 years curating. It's called Unwatchable Footage. And it was literally an hour of unwatchable footage. You'd sat there like this, and it was just like war footage. That was just unbelievable. So, it is that's right. Okay, I got two more and we're done. Thank you so much. This one
Mhm.
is Thornton Wilder. 1928. Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for 2 hours. I thank you. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Um, I think it is what is about is I want to share with other people the stuff that I think is cool and I think has been overlooked and is at risk of being lost forever.
Yeah, really good. What gives you the most optimism?
Um, it gives me optimism when I'm looking at what's going on in the world and I'm seeing unlikely candidates pushing back. Like, for example, Chicago police not supporting ICE or something
Yeah.
like that. Those types of things give me a little hope that maybe this isn't all just proceeding in a doomed fashion, and perhaps there will be enough resistance to keep things from going off the edge of the cliff.
Hope. Thank you so much. Because, Sarah, the first question I asked, what's the best thing for a human being? Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being. The last question I asked is what gives you the most optimism, is what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he said, other people. So it's sure been fun spending this time with another person, especially because it was you. Thank you so much for your time and energy.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Yeah. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever. I'd love to join you in a cold plunge someday, but I probably wouldn't, but it sounds so inviting.
Okay.
Okay. See ya. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.